Hi everyone, Steve Perryman here again on the Steve Perryman podcast. As ever, ably helped by Tom in the technical room, and Howard, of course. Welcome, Howard.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And our special guest, because of the subject of this podcast is about the book Sir Bill. Our very special guest is Norman Giller, who, of course, wrote the book. I'd like to say I helped write it, but my writing skills are not great. But my speaking skills are still intact. So, Howard, your viewpoint on all this is as a long-term supporter.
Yes, I worked it out recently. 55 years.
55 years, wow. And some might say long-suffering. But it wasn't early days long-suffering, Howard, was it?
No, certainly not.
So you've got some words that you'd like to express about...
Just I thought might help us kick off.
Yes, please. Carry on.
Sir Bill Nicholson. I've always felt that he should have had a knighthood attached to his name. He was a great man in many ways. Sir Bill was special because he loved the club, he loved the game, and he respected the fans. And when he left, instead of the board listening to him suggest Danny Blanchflower, who had been our captain, to be his replacement, the board hired Terry Neal, who had been the Arsenal captain. I was very upset because I felt it was a smack in the face for all the loyalty and hard-working success Bill had given our club. But a year later, when Terry Neal quit, Keith Burkinshaw took over and he brought Sir Bill back into the club. That was really good news. Football's a tough business, and few men really conquer it. I think he was one who did.
Great, Howard. Thank you very much. So,
that's a lovely tribute there. And
nice tribute. Nice tribute.
Can I say right at the off that for the first time in many years of writing books, I felt really nervous with this one. And the reason was that I felt Bill was on my shoulder. And right the way through my writing career and my many conversations with Bill, he always used to accuse me of writing fairy tales. Because Bill was such a realist, as we both know. And he didn't go in for fantasy. He wanted it as it was. And as I said, I felt nervous thinking Bill's watching me. And I just hope that you and I, Steve, have done him justice.
Well, yeah, we had a bloody good try at it, Norman, that's for sure. And that nervousness you talk about, that's how I felt as a young player, all of a sudden being put into first team training sessions, ever before I got a debut, for instance. And, you would do these particular exercises, crossing the ball from the right, and then you with your right foot, of course, and then you would end up going behind the goal and ended up in a queue on the left-hand side. And guess what? My left was not anywhere near good enough or anywhere near as good as my right. So the nervousness going through my body and my mind before having to cross that ball. And, it was only going to be people like Jimmy Greaves or Alan Gilzine on the end of it. So you can understand my fear of if I put the ball behind people like that and they've wasted their running for my poor left foot. So nervous about Bill and nervous about, what he'd set up as such. So Howard called him a great man. Norman, do you have any words of that?
Well, Steve, don't forget, I knew Bill as me being a young fan, watching this great man running around on the pitch. And I'll tell you who he put me in mind of for our younger listeners, a gentleman called Steve Perryman. I don't know if you ever saw him play, Steve.
No.
Well,
no chance.
Bill Nicholson played the game with always putting the team first. And I saw these same attributes in a youngster called Steve Perryman. And this is why Bill was so keen to get you into that first team so young, because he knew that you would develop into another Bill Nicholson. And I
Well,
can't give you a greater compliment than that, Steve, than that you actually met all those expectations and more.
I'm not sure I can handle that, Norman. But anyway, thank you for the very kind words. But I mean, he was a great man, wasn't he? He was a great man.
He was, he was a great man, and he was an honest man. And
Yeah,
you don't get too many of those fish these days, I'm afraid.
no,
That's including sport, politics, in life. You don't get people being really truly honest. And Bill, to my knowledge, never ever told a lie. He always told it as it was, and he'd look you in the eye and he would say, "Norman, no more fairy tales. Write the truth."
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that was what lured me to sign for Tottenham. And although, of course, as a 14, 15-year-old, I knew the power, the quality of Tottenham Hotspur, led by the great Bill. Um, but you know, I'd never been to the ground. I'd never met anyone at Tottenham. And in West London, there were very few sort of Tottenham supporters or openly supporters of Tottenham. So when he sat in our front room, our best room, um, trying to encourage me to sign, you know, there was no flannel, there was no spin, there was no mind games. He just told you exactly what you needed to hear. And and you know, this was like how many such characters would you have in your house as such? And here we are. I mean, of course, I had a few in the end because a lot of clubs wanted to sign me, but it shone through this honesty. And yeah, and the moment that I said, Bill, I'm going to join your club, I was actually saying, Bill, I'm going to join you because that was
Steve,
my trust for him.
Steve, we're talking the 60s here. And I, in those days, was earning my daily bread as a football reporter, and I had my ear to the ground. And I knew that there was a young guy in West London called Steve Perryman, who was an exceptional young prospect. And I was fully expecting Steve Perryman to sign with lots of backhanders offered to him, either for QPR or Chelsea.
Mm.
And it was amazing that you turned up at Tottenham because I knew Bill Nicholson would never pay backhanders. Yet there we had this great young prospect signing for Spurs. Can you tell us why, Steve, you chose Tottenham over those other clubs?
Well, I think that a young player signing for such a big club with a great manager um, needs the manager, the decision maker, to not to do him favors. Certainly, there was no favors done. Bill was too much of a realist to do that. But I would say he gave me more than an even chance because of what you just said. He knew he knew that about the money from other clubs. He knew, and I decided not to take that. Um, that would have been too short term to take the money sort of up front, and in a way, taking money off someone, you you're going to be bought. You're going to be bought off, and that absolutely didn't appeal to me. So I think from that first decision, I was going down the Bill Nicholson line of hopefully being honest and giving my all in a performance, etc. But the day that I said to him, Bill, I hopefully it's good news for you. I'm going to sign for Tottenham, and he said, Steve, that's great. I'm so pleased. I've never been so pleased to sign a young player. And I said, but Bill, I want to live here. I don't want to live in digs. I want to live here. And he said, well, you obviously know how long that journey is for you. It's going to take about 2 hours there and 2 hours back. And when you leave school at 15, that's 4 hours on your day. Are you sure that you can handle that? I said, Bill, I'm going to give it a go. That's what I want to do. And he said, and this is typical Bill, right, I'm pleased that you've signed. You're going to sign. I'm aware of your journey, but that does not allow you to be late 1 minute on one day, be it for a training session, be it for a game, for the youth team even. It does not give you a license to be late. And straight away, that was Bill setting the tone. And that's how I saw Bill. He was about the environment. The environment he created was one of honesty. You know, one other manager said to me at one time, if you've got a player that's always going to be late, the message that he's giving you without telling you direct is, I don't want to be here. So you can imagine. And driving around that bloody North Circular, eventually when I could learn to drive and buy a little car, there was a chemical spillage on the North Circular, and I was late. And I was only about 10 minutes late. Because we trained at, say, 10 o'clock, if you were arriving after 9:30, that was rated as late. So I probably arrived 9:40. And when you walk into that first team dressing room where Bill was changing with us, you have to look at him. Eventually, you have to look at him. And then when you do, his eyes are like piercing you. And of course, I spent a number of minutes getting changed, but looking at the floor. And Cyril Knowles said, Steve, what's on the floor there that you're looking for? So, typical Cyril. So I said, yeah, no, nothing, Cyril. And then Bill Nicholson said, Steve, what time did you leave here yesterday? About 2 o'clock, Bill, 2:30. He said, so you've had from 2:30 yesterday to get here on time today, and you couldn't do it. Have a think about that. And although it's quite a small point to a young player, actually with genuine reasons for being late, he's making the point to the whole dressing room. Basically, I don't like this. You're going to be late. You're going to be sloppy. You'll be late and sloppy on a match day. You'll be sloppy with your passing. So liven yourself up. And
Steve, you'll give me the chance here to say that we're skipping several chapters.
Of course we are. Yeah.
Because the Bill Nicholson you're quoting here was the Bill Nicholson who was born in 1919, and although he wasn't born in Victorian times, he was Victorian in his ways because he had Victorian parents, Victorian teachers, and that 19th century never ever left Bill. And
Exactly.
So he went into the job as manager of Spurs with Victorian principles. And that's what he was passing on to you. And you're a very lucky man, Steve, to have had
Very,
that discipline that early in your life. Because
very
it
lucky.
stuck with you throughout your life. And it's down to Bill Nicholson.
And I would go as far as to saying, Norman, that the best decision I ever made was to join the club that's led by Bill Nicholson.
Correct.
That's the best decision. And yeah, great man.
And
So
where I'm fortunate, where I'm very fortunate, Steve, is that I saw him playing the game, and Bill Nicholson was a midfielder, a ball winner. As they weren't called ball winners in those days, but he was an anchor man in midfield, and
yeah,
he'd get the ball and would give it to Eddie Bailey in this marvelous push and run team that they had. That was he was taught by Arthur Rowe, and before that by a gentleman called Peter McWilliam, who
yes,
who is the man who was the real father of push and run. He
yeah,
taught Arthur Rowe. He would say to him, "This is football, not handball," and he would insist on playing the Scottish way, and that's the way Spurs always played it along the ground. And now we see it even with Ange the ball is always being played along the ground. You rarely see him punting the ball upfield. That was never Bill Nicholson's way. Bill always insisted on you using the ball with accuracy and with determination that he always showed the player. He passed on to his players. And
Yeah.
Steve, you epitomise that because you always played with great determination and dedication.
Well, I come back to the famous words he used with me the first time I walked through the door, which was, Steve, if you play quick, easy, and accurate, you'll have a career. So, and that brings me on, Norman, to the Howard quote that he loved the club, he loved the game, and respected the fans. So that love of the game meant that he never cheated the game, did he?
No,
He,
I'm
he
like
never
you,
went against his principles.
Steve. I'm like you. I've spent a lifetime in the game, on the periphery, not like you, actually involved in it, but nevertheless, I've been an eyewitness of everything, and I've never ever come across a manager who was so keen to put the fans first. Bill Nicholson always quoted to you as Steve Perryman and to all the Spurs players, the fans pay your wages, give them value for money.
Yeah,
And that was what his big guiding principle. He always put the fans first. And you
yeah,
rarely find that in modern managers.
yeah. Howard, did you get that feeling as a supporter
Absolutely.
that Bill Nicholson was looking after your interests as a
Totally.
paying customer?
Yep. Exactly what we got.
Yeah,
Because you knew it was truthful. You knew it was honest. And
yeah,
I think to myself that the story about the double, the cup winning that day when we won the double against Leicester, that he went into their dressing room and told them that they deserved to win.
yeah, yeah.
We get that.
Honest, honest.
Bill was a down man. Yeah, he
Yeah.
never ever showed in his teams because he insisted on you going out to entertain the spectators. How many managers use that word? Go out and entertain. But
Yeah,
Bill Nicholson did.
yeah, very much so. And that's a similarity with Keith Burkinshaw,
Yep.
as per
Yeah,
that dourness,
yeah,
That
Yorkshire.
Yorkshire grit, and
Yeah,
the but as you say, didn't pick a dour team.
no,
So that's the link between the two. But that respect to the fans that shines through, doesn't it? I
Yep.
mean, I didn't know too much about what was going on behind the scenes, but if they were to put the price up of anything, it took them about 6 months of meetings before they decided to put the program up by X
Penny.
amount. And we're talking pennies here,
Yeah.
yeah,
or the entrance fee by X. So that was a real, and he used it all the time with us, Norman and Howard. It's a, maybe there was some criticism, a letter in the local paper or something, and he'd say to us, do you think that the supporters are mugs? Do you think they don't know the game? Of course they know the game. Of course they do. And the way he put that across is that you are responsible. Of course, you're responsible for your performance, for the team result in front of those fans that are backing you. They're backing you instead of backing someone else. And I mean, that's so much common sense, isn't it? So much common
Totally.
sense.
well,
So the fact that the club didn't listen uh, to Bill, as Howard quite rightly said, that must have hurt him, mustn't it,
Oh,
Norman?
well, well, um, I was so close to Bill that I knew before most people that he was thinking of resigning,
Okay.
and I got wind of the fact that he was approaching Danny Blanchflower to be his successor.
yeah.
And Danny was then my colleague on Express newspapers, and I phoned him up and I said, what's this, Danny, about you taking over at Tottenham?" And the phone went dead which is very unusual when you're talking to Danny Blanchard, because he, he, he filled every living second with wonderful words, wise words, and
Yeah.
often a lot of flannel. I used to call him Danny Blanchy Flower, Blarney Flower, because he was full of Blarney, but he had so much intelligence. Anyway, he said to me, I don't know how you found this out. He said, but I want to meet you. He said, and I'm going to swear you to confidence. And we went and had a coffee in the Alex Forbes cafe in Blackfriars, just off the embankment.
Ah,
And it was, and we still called it Alex Forbes, even though Alex Forbes had sold it many years.
moved on.
He was the Arsenal
Yes. Yeah.
midfielder,
Yeah.
a cracking player. Anyway, Danny said to me that you've got your facts right. He said, but I'm swearing you to confidence. He said, and uh, Bill has approached me, and I'm trying to talk him out of it because I don't think he should quit. He said, but he's also approached Johnny Giles, which is a name that should make you come out in spots,
Ives.
A
Steve.
rush. A rush. Already, I've got it.
uh,
But what a great player.
Oh, and more great football brain, you know.
Oh, kidding.
And I mean, and Danny and Johnny combined would have been absolutely perfect at that time.
Yeah.
But the board took umbrage to the fact that Bill still thought he was managing the club, and they decided to ignore him. And they went for Terry Neal, who, as we all know, had Arsenal red blood. And the big factor to remember about Terry was that he was only 34, which
Yeah.
meant he was younger than several of the players at
Yeah.
Spurs who had been kicking him up in the air in the London derbies, the North London derbies. And there he
Yes.
was telling them how to play the game.
Yeah.
He was a lovely man, Terry Neal. A real Irishman, lots of stories. He knew his football inside out and back to front, but he was never ever meant to be a Spurs manager. And
It's about right.
the best thing that happened to the club is that he had met Keith Burkinshaw on coaching courses, brought Keith in as a coach. He was third in line at Tottenham at the
Yep.
time,
Yep.
and
That's right.
the board, being the miserly lot that they were, they wouldn't pay for a big name replacement. So they thought they'd give Keith a go, not because they thought they could do the job, because he was cheap. And
Yeah.
Keith struggled in his first season. These days, the keyboard warriors would have had him out in his ear. They would have attacked him on the social media, but the board stuck with him. And Steve, you were captain at the time,
Yep.
and you came straight back up, and it was from then on we had 3 years, fabulous years under Burkinshaw and Perryman. And what days they were, Steve?
Yeah. And by the way, one of his best signings was to bring Bill back,
Oh, well,
get him back in the fold,
Yep.
which is where he deserved to be. Should never have
No.
left.
Nah.
well, he was a fish out of water at West Ham. I mean, they were wonderful people at West Ham. Ronnie Greenwood and John Lyall looked
Great
after
people.
Bill and Eddie Bailey, and they were both employed by West Ham, and it was wonderful of West Ham to do that. But Bill's heart was down the North Circle at North N17.
Yeah.
He never felt comfortable in E15. He was an N17 man all the way through.
Yeah.
And thank goodness, thanks to Keith's vision and not being frightened. You know, most managers wouldn't want somebody that powerful beneath them because they'd be fearful that they'll be taking their job. But Bill was there to help Keith, and he never ever interfered.
Never. That was the good thing about Keith, that he was open-minded enough
And
that
can we also give credit here to Irving Scholar, who had lots of faults, but he was a Spurs man through and through, and really knew his club history, and he played a big part in bringing Bill Nicholson back into the fold.
yeah, yeah, but Of course, that's for sure. But I think it would have been Keith's decision to make the
Yeah,
final hit,
100%.
because if you put someone in a staff room with the manager, you could be putting the wrong person in,
Yeah.
and of course Bill wasn't that type of person, and therefore, Keith, when Keith played his final game and we beat Anderlecht on that famous night. I mean, what better way? I know Wembley is magnificent, and the FA Cup was, one of the highest accolades that you could get, but in front of 100,000. But to win a European trophy in front of your own crowd, it doesn't get much better than that, does it? On your final day of work at the club where you joined some years ago. But the fact that me and Glenn were the only two players that survived the relegation, and I was talking to Glenn last night about this. We were at a function in Swindon. Keith rebuilt that whole team that you saw on display that night, from the signing of the Argentinian Ardiles, to going to Aberdeen and signing Archibald, or Stoke to get Garth Crooks or whatever. But also the people that Bill Nicholson helped sign, Roberts and Galvin from non-league.
Yeah.
Wow, what two signings those were.
Well, but Bill, as you know, his role was chief scout, and
Yes,
and no scout walking this earth knew more about football than Bill Nicholson. And
exactly.
how lucky those boys were that he was sitting in the stand and was able to watch them and approve them for Tottenham Hotspur. If he said they were Tottenham players, that was the greatest accolade he could have given any player.
Yeah, but you imagine the great Bill Nicholson that signed people like Jimmy Greaves, Alan Gilzine, Mike England, Martin Chivers, Pat Jennings. Although Pat, when he signed him, wasn't as big
Yeah.
as we know Pat now, but
Bag of nerves
but
when he first signed.
yeah, but this man is going to judge non-league players, and sometimes out of being too snobbish as a top line manager, you would find every fault in the book with a non-league player. But Bill Nick saw enough. Of course, every sign is a chance. There's a chance of making it or not making it. But the fact that Bill Nick put his name against those two players, but also Gary Mabbutt, I think had a lot to do with that one.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about Danny Thomas and Gary Stevens. I think maybe they were Keith's and Peter Shreve's decisions. But definitely Mabsy was part of this Bill Nick group of signings. And, instead of looking at them from top down, thinking, well, he's not as good as Mike England or he's not as good as whoever, he's thinking about what they could do. You're never going to go to a non-league club and find the perfect player, are you? But you're going to find a player that could turn into something.
Let's not forget, Steve, that when Bill was managing, he was known as a checkbook manager because he set the record in every position on the pitch.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, Mike England was an English record. Jimmy Greaves obviously was a nearly a world record,
Yeah,
and Alan Gilzine was a British record when he came down from Scotland, 72,500. I mean, sounds a joke now, doesn't it? 72,500.
yeah,
But uh, Cliffy Jones was already there, so he was lucky to inherit Cliffy.
yes,
Cliffy was signed before Bill became manager. Jimmy
yeah,
Anderson signed him. Um, Pat Jennings was a bag of nerves, and Bill Brown came back into the team for for about half a season while Pat got his confidence.
yeah.
Cyril Knowles was a record signing as a left back from Middlesbrough. What a player!
What a
He
player.
Well, I don't know if you know when Bill was playing, he was known as Ginger Nicholson because he had dark ginger hair,
Okay.
and there was Cyril Knowles was signed from Middlesbrough, and he turned Bill Nicholson's ginger hair grey because he could never do the orthodox thing,
No,
Cyril.
couldn't.
And the number of times I saw him dribble the ball along the bloody goal line, you know,
Yeah.
Yes.
I
right,
played I played in some of those games where he did that.
yeah.
Bill Nick. Howard, who was your favourite Bill Nick signing?
I'll probably end up going to Jimmy.
Yeah,
Yeah, can understand that. Yeah. What a player he was, eh?
Oh,
What a player. And that's an era, of course, where people wanted to sign for Tottenham.
yeah, exactly.
I don't think Bill Nick had to be a great salesman to say, would you like to sign for Tottenham?
in our book, Steve, we made the point that Jimmy was offered more money to return to Chelsea than he was earning at Tottenham. But he wanted to play for Bill Nicholson and he
Mm.
wanted to play for that Bill Nicholson double team.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Jimmy was petrified, you know. People think he's such a confident guy, but Jimmy was petrified of upsetting the rhythm of that side. But
Was
he
he?
made his debut against Blackpool, scored a hat trick, including a scissors kick goal, which is incredible. And from then on, the fans loved him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he was definitely the most popular of all Bill signings. And the
Yeah.
fact, and what we cover in the book, is that Jimmy, when he went to West Ham, many fans never ever forgave Bill, but we give Bill's side of it. And Bill Nicholson made the strong point that the Jimmy Greaves that he let go to West Ham was not the Jimmy Greaves he signed from AC Milan.
Yeah.
Jimmy had lost his appetite for the game, more interested in World Cup rally driving, more interested in his little business empire that he was building, more interested in his boozing, I'm afraid. And so Bill Nicholson makes the point that the Jimmy Greaves who went to West Ham was not the Jimmy Greaves all those Spurs fans had fallen in love with. But a lot of fans never ever forgave Bill for letting Jimmy go.
Yeah.
I was a huge Jimmy fan. I mean, I was
Who,
13
who
years
was
old.
Howard? Who wasn't? Who, you,
The
yeah,
idiots, the ones who didn't understand.
oh,
But
Yeah.
I look at that list, look at
Stevie
that.
Wonder, Stevie Wonder would have loved Jimmy. You know,
Oh,
he was the king.
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
the only
What
thing
a
that bothers me is having you've listed those names of those players, and they're great players, and they all were entertainers. Why didn't we win more than we did?
You can analyze it very easily. No, those mid 1960s, he lost Danny to retirement,
Yes.
37 years old. He lost Dave Mackay to a broken leg,
Yeah.
and he lost dear John White to a streak of lightning.
yeah.
And he'd lost the eyes,
Yeah.
Danny Blanchard. He'd lost the heart, Dave Mackay, and he'd lost the brains, John White. And no
Yeah.
team stood that. And
Yeah. I always say that actually as much as we're in favour of Bill and his ways, etc., that it was the three players that he signed, Roger Morgan, Jimmy Pearce, and Peter Collins, also from non-league, Chelmsford.
yeah,
The fact that they had to finish injury early in their career,
yeah,
mid 20s, and those weren't really replaced. Jimmy Pearce was going to replace Jimmy Greaves. Peter Collins was going to replace Mike England. Roger Morgan was going to replace whoever. And yeah, I think that was all part of the eventual relegation.
yeah,
The fact that they weren't replaced in the right
Mm.
manner. Of course, we signed players, but we didn't replace them in the right way, the right level. So with the normal losing of players who get old and move on. Of course, we all get to that stage at some point. So there was a lot of changes going on within it all, and it ended up almost like past the parcel. Well, the relegation parcel ended up with Keith.
Steve, don't let's put Bill down too much. Let's remember that in the 60s, he not only built the double team, he built another very, very good team, which is the '67 FA Cup winners,
Sure,
Mm.
which had
sure.
the Dave the Miracle Man and Jimmy with it were the only two left. Clifford Jones was coming to the end
Yes,
from the great days, but
yeah,
he had Alan Mullery, the tank. He had
yeah,
Mike England, one of the best centre halves I've ever seen.
yeah,
Um, Dave Mackay made that miraculous comeback and
Yeah.
lifted the team. And he brought in a youngster called Alan Gilzine.
yeah,
Now, Gillian Gilzine together were magical, the G-men.
yeah. And
Uh,
by the way, as you're talking, you know, it's Dave Mackay's 90, would have been his 90th birthday today.
Mm.
oh,
The great
God bless,
Dave Mackay.
God
Yeah,
bless David. Oh,
there's a warrior.
Mm.
There's a warrior. There's a leader.
oh,
And I know we're not talking about today's
oh.
times,
If we were,
but there is a warrior. And you know, young Steve Perryman walking through the doors at 15 years of age. I probably didn't talk to Dave for probably a year. Why would he speak to me? But you were so aware of what he stood for and how he led that group of players. Wow, wow, what a player, what a man.
well,
And
he was Bill Nicholson's first signing, and Bill would say it is his best ever signing. But he always used to say, put a gun to his head, and he would put one player ahead of Dave Mackay, and that was Ronnie Burgess, who
yes,
managed
I remember that.
who managed the who captained the push and run team.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
he was a Welshman who allegedly trod on every blade of grass at White Hart Lane. Not that there were many blades of grass around in those.
yeah. I wonder where that grass went. Perhaps he took the grass with him when he left.
But we can honestly mention Steve Perryman in the same breath because you were Ronnie Burgess. You ran everywhere for the team, and Ronnie Burgess was the team player, and so were you, Steve. And that's what
Norman,
the team is lacking
Norman,
today.
Norman. I need an agent. I need an. It's probably too late for me. I can't recover it, but I need.
We got just the man for you.
Howard, you could be his assistant. You're not bad
Yep.
with praise.
But I might be late for.
Well, and it great talking about the old times. And it great.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Steve, the vital thing is, I hope when people we've written a book in a conversational way, and I hope
Yeah,
people feel number one that they're part of the conversation, and I feel hope that when they close that last page, they say they've done Bill justice,
Mm.
because
yeah.
because I want that more than any money we might make from it. I
Sure,
want I
sure.
want people to think of that book as the definitive biography of Bill Nicholson, the greatest man who ever crossed the pathway into White Hart Lane.
And I hope that our younger supporters who, you know, have been led to our club.
They need to know the history.
Yeah,
Mm.
they've been led to their club by their fathers or their grandfathers. And you know, why did those older members of their family, why did they support Tottenham as they did? Well, it was Bill Nicholson and the teams that he produced, as you say, even the late 60s. And you know, I was lucky enough to be involved in the early 70s team that I don't think could live with either of the first two teams that Bill
Yeah.
built. But you know, we still managed to win some trophies
Yeah.
and lift up the image of the club, which is difficult to do when you follow such great players. And I suppose that was always the thing with Bill, that he was never happy with you. He always thought you could do better. And what a great man, what a great mentor to have leading your career.
And
Someone that was not
Steve,
happy.
let me say a sizzling part of the book is the um, combination of Bill Nicholson and Eddie Bailey
Oh,
against,
bless him.
against Martin Chivers. and you
Yeah.
were an eyewitness to their battles. I mean, that must have been fascinating to have been in the dressing room to watch them arguing with each other.
Well, you mentioned Alan Mallory, the tank, before. Now, this also was a captain. And, basically, after most games, I hope my memory's not playing games with me, but Bill would always have some opinion on Cyril, as you alluded to earlier, about how he did this or how he did that. And Cyril would just shake his head and look at the floor. And anyway, but Martin Chivers was next. And Eddie would join in on that one. He would leave Cyril alone, but he would join in on that one.
Eddie would lead.
And Mullers would stand up and protect. That's a captain. Bill, why don't you leave him alone? Why don't you give him some confidence? Don't keep knocking him. But you know what? He talked Chiv out of the slump that he was in.
Mm.
And that might have been injury induced or whatever. Of course, he had a bad injury, didn't he, Chiv?
Yeah.
And think about the time when Bill didn't pick Chiv and he'd paid all this money for him. And he told him he wasn't going to pick him for the next 2 or 3 games. And the reason being that, Chiv, you're going to go and watch Jeff Hurst play. I mean, wow, that's some leadership, eh? And but look what he came back to.
Yeah,
Chiv
sulked about that. I mean, he hated it, but he followed orders and went and watched Jeff. Learned a lot about positioning because Jeff was a master of the positional play.
Yes.
Taught to him by Ron Greenwood. And then Martin Chivers became, I'd say, for 2 or certainly 2 seasons, 3 seasons possibly, the greatest centre forward in Europe, without doubt.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah.
He could have, if he got put away, say from the halfway line, almost going to be one against one with an opponent, and definitely 1 against 2 because of the goalkeeper. You almost didn't back it up.
Yeah.
Because you knew that it was going to end up in the net. Well, you're wasting your legs to run after that because you won't be necessary. I mean, that probably didn't do Chiv any favours because if Chiv had hit the post and come back, he wouldn't have been able to get it himself. It was someone else that should have got it. But yeah, wonderful times.
Can you remember that first leg of the Fairs Cup against final against Wolves when Chiv scored 2 fantastic goals, and Eddie Bailey kept, afterwards in the dressing room kissed his feet. He said, "You won me outright."
You've won, Chiv. You've won. Wow. Well, I have really enjoyed this. Thank you for your words, Howard.
My pleasure.
I think we've picked up everything that you've said. And your last line was, football's a tough business and few men conquer it. Did he conquer it, Norman?
Oh, Bill was William the Conqueror. Wish I thought of that line for the book.
Sir Bill and William the Conqueror. Wow. Yeah. What an accolade that is. Yeah. So thank you very much for listening. For those that buy the book, hopefully you enjoy it.
More than enjoy it, I hope that they say Bill Nicholson was the greatest manager of all time, because that's the accolade that we've tried to give him.
Give him, absolutely. Howard, you haven't read the book yet, have you? Because I've still got your book here, which doesn't do our sales any good. but I want to deliver it to you rather than send it to you. If that's all right. So, but I know that you're going to enjoy it, Howard. And thank you very much for your input as ever. And to all those Spurs supporters, keep the faith. I still believe that Ange is the man. And
so do I.
Yeah, let's be positive together. And up the Spurs. Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.
Thank you, chaps.